You probably read slave narratives in American literature, but now you're going to read a slave narrative by a woman enslaved in the British territories in the West Indies. Be alert to the ways that this slave narrative is different from the ones you've read before. One difference, of course, is that this narrative is written by a woman, while most slave narratives were written by men. What difference does this make to Mary Prince's story? Think about this question as you read. Another difference is context. The experience of American slaves is partly determined by American history and society and the poisonous growth of the institution of slavery in the American South. The British context, however, is somewhat different. Slavery was illegal in England. This was firmly established in 1772 when the Lord Chief Justice declared that under English law, everyone in England is free. There are no slaves in England. No slaves could be kept in England. This didn't apply, however, to the territories of the expanding British Empire, in particular to the West Indies, where Mary Prince was enslaved. Also, British citizens participated in the slave trade between Africa and North America and profited from it. As a result of a concerted public campaign, however, in 1807, attitudes about slavery had significantly changed, and Parliament passed the Slave Trade Act, which abolished the slave trade in all British territories. And this act had teeth. The British Navy actively intercepted slave ships off the coast of Africa and returned the enslaved people on board to their own land. So it was actually enforced. But people already enslaved and their children are still enslaved. It wasn't until 1833 that Parliament voted to abolish slavery in all British territories. All of this, this peaceful abolition of first the slave trade and then slavery in British territories, resulted from a concerted public campaign by a dedicated group of abolitionists. This included Quakers, who were very much dedicated to the idea of human equality, evangelicals, and many others who were just inspired by the ideals of freedom and equality that the Enlightenment had promoted. The image that you see here was designed in 1787 by Josiah Wedgwood, who was famous for making beautiful china and pottery. And his firm designed this for the Society for Effecting the Abolition of the Slave Trade. This was their symbol, and it appeared everywhere. On china medallions that Wedgwood mass-produced, book plates, wall hangings. Men and women both wore cameos of this, men on their ties and women on their hats. Clay pipes were engraved with this. It was a constant reminder of the campaign. It was the first time an image had been used this way in a public campaign, and it did have a significant effect, actually on both sides of the Atlantic. It was very popular in Philadelphia to wear this image as a kind of fashion statement among abolitionists in the circle of, say, Benjamin Franklin. Mary Prince's story, though, also influenced the campaign for the abolition of slavery. Now, it was published in 1831. That's after the abolition of the slave trade in 1807, but before the abolition of slavery in British territories in 1833. So it was published by abolitionists as part of the campaign to abolish slavery. Okay, we've looked at some differences between other slave narratives and this one. Most of our other slave narratives had been written by men. This one was written by a woman. Most of the slave narratives we've read have probably come from U.S. sources, and so their context is U.S. history and law, whereas the context for this one is British history and law. But there's one further difference, and that is the audience. American audiences in the South had frequent contact with slaves, and they witnessed the impact of slavery every day. And even Northerners could not escape direct knowledge of slavery in their country. But the British, Mary Prince's British audience, was different. They didn't have this kind of direct contact with slavery. They had to be informed about the reality of slavery in a way that the US audience didn't. And they had to be convinced that it was evil and had to be abolished. So as you read, look for ways that Mary Prince attempts to communicate with this specific audience. This will be the topic of our discussion after you've read Mary Prince's autobiography.